Hello, I'm Dean Zerbe. I'm Senior Policy Analyst at the National Whistleblower Center, and I'm also an attorney myself representing tax whistleblowers at Zerbe Miller Fingerette. Just want to go through the basics of the tax whistleblower program today with a particular emphasis on those who maybe are blowing the whistle for offshore people with illegal offshore accounts, an area of great interest for the IRS. So let me kind of cover some of the basics very quickly. For the IRS, they have a whistleblower reward program where basically a whistleblower can look to getting 15 to 30% of the monies that the IRS collects from information provided by the whistleblower. There's three requirements for the whistleblower. One, you need to obviously provide the IRS information. Two, the IRS needs to proceed based on that information. And then three, they obviously have to get money in the till and all rights to appeal are over. I would say to you that there's kind of five things that I look for that are a good whistleblower filing, really six to start off with. The first one is that you need to be specific. You got to be very specific about who it is that you're talking about, who's the taxpayer, taxpayers that are at issue, or the company, or what have you. In other words, it can't just be, well, I'm in my mom's basement, I've been looking at the cotton industry, and I think there's some things going on. You need to really get into detail about it's this taxpayer, this is what they're doing, here's their address, you get the idea, kind of chapter and verse on them. What the IRS wants to see is things that are current. There's a little bit of an exception for that actually with people with offshore accounts, because since they've never declared it supposedly, then it can go on forever. So they're not as worried about that. But in general, you want to see things that are maybe 3 years at most old for an individual, 5, 6 years old for a corporation, and ideally they're still doing it. In other words, they've been doing it for a number of years and they're still doing it, as kind of the sweet spot to be, if you will. So that's number one. Two, they want whistleblowers that have got good information. They really like insiders more than anything, people who know what's going on, who are aware of what's happening, and have a background as well too is kind of beneficial. That again, they're probably happiest when they're getting the senior bank official or the tax department or an accountant, somebody who really has a handle on what's happening and what's going on in the area of tax for the individual company involved. Three, if they can, they love to get documents. They love to have documentation about what's going on and what's happening. And if you think about kind of both having an individual who knows what they're talking about and having documents, is that the IRS is really underfunded. So for them to launch the ships to go after a taxpayer, they really want to have a high confidence that, yes, there's something going on here, and the whistleblower knows what they're talking about, has got support for what they're saying. And you may not, have all these items ticked, but those again are kind of the preferred way of doing it. Four, they like it to be real dollars, and that's kind of proportional. In other words, if it's IBM you're talking about or Exxon, probably not going to be that interested in a $10 million adjustment. These are major companies. They're going to be looking at major dollars. But similarly, $10 million for an individual, that's really big money. I mean, I think anytime you're $2-3 million with an individual, they're going to have a pretty strong interest in that. So that's going to be of interest for them as well, too, in terms of it. And then last, I think they have an interest if the taxpayer is kind of what I call evil. I mean, it's one thing if you're saying, well, they donated this painting and I think it's really worth $4 million, and they claimed it was worth $6 million. Okay, I mean, that's fine. What they prefer though is if you can say, well, they donated this painting, but they never owned this painting and the museum doesn't even exist. That's a good story. So again, it kind of gives you a feel for what they're looking for in terms of a good filing. Just some other points to remember is that you do have to provide your name to the IRS, but the IRS is very good at protecting your anonymity to the world. In other words, they're not going to tell the taxpayer that there is a whistleblower. They're going to protect your name. They'll protect it internally at the IRS as well too. They typically kind of blot your name out when they send the information to the field. And again, they'll never admit to the whistleblower, to the taxpayer, beg your pardon, that there is even a whistleblower. And they'll be very good about protecting that. I've worked with them for years, and I think they're very professional and competent in terms of trying to do all they can to protect the whistleblower's identity. The other point I'd make is that kind of the basics are you need to file the 211 and you need to have a narrative that goes with it. And that's kind of the critical piece in all this is getting the narrative right, getting the documentation right, making sure you're kind of covering the waterfront. There's a lot of bells and whistles to making certain that you've got it right, because IRS gets a lot of filings, and it's making your filing stand out, be looked at, and be considered is kind of an art and a science. And obviously the attorneys, I do this, but others do, and it's typically a contingency fee for those who are interested in that. Let me turn a bit to the offshore accounts as well too. So this is an area of huge interest for the IRS, as I mentioned. I represented Brad Birkenfeld, the UBS whistleblower, along with Steve Cohn, who's well too. And as many of you know, Brad got a $104 million award, so he did all right with the program. And so what they're looking for on that, again, is you've got to think about it is you really don't want the person who comes in from the bar and says, you know, this fellow was talking to me over drinks and said, you know, he had one of these accounts. No, I didn't get his name, and, you know, but he does drive this nice car. You get the idea. That's not what they want. They want is the fellow that says, yeah, here's a thumb drive of all the name, address, social security number, you know, particularly if they're setting up accounts, and, you know, who the beneficial owner is, who is that beneficial owner, all those kind of details. And you may not have everything on it, but you get the idea. They like as many pieces of the puzzle as possible, the account balance, all that. But it is a big interest for the service. In fact, the IRS just recently announced an initiative going after high wealth individuals who aren't paying their taxes, who aren't filing their taxes. And certainly this fits well within that in terms of having people who are not filing, not declaring their offshore accounts. And I should add, that's the other piece of it is, are they declaring it? Obviously, you can have an offshore account as long as you declare it. But who the IRS is really interested in are the people who are not declaring it. And sometimes, again, that may not have perfect information on that, but there can be kind of indications or what have you. One thing I should add too is that the IRS is perfectly happy to get information and reward people that are not U.S. citizens. In other words, if you're offshore, if you're in a foreign country that has illegal accounts and you work there, that's fine by the IRS. And again, they'll protect your anonymity, but you're exactly the kind of person that they want coming in and telling them about what's going on. And again, documentation can be a very big help in that as well too. So the offshore accounts, no question, are ones that they want to take a hard look at. One thing I should just add here too is we kind of cover the waterfront is that if you have any questions, if I haven't covered anything, you should feel free. You can obviously contact me through the National Whistleblower Center. You can also email me directly at D as in dog, Zerbe, Z-E-R-B-E, at ZM as in Mary, F as in Frank, law.com. So feel free to send me any questions or concerns you've got. I'm happy to talk to you just as a courtesy and get you into a comfortable place. But those are the basics of what they're looking for in terms of the program at the IRS. The other pieces I would say to you is that, so typically what you want to do in the narrative is best put your best foot forward. In other words, you want to put on your best prom dress, you want to get the lipstick on and get it in there. A lot of people who come to me after things have kind of gone wrong with the IRS or they're not moving along, they'll say, well, yeah, I had this killer email, but I wanted to wait till they called me before I gave that to the IRS. Don't do that. Give the IRS everything you've got in terms of it, and particularly, obviously, the most critical information. You need to give it to them because they're really only going to look at this once, and you want to make sure that they've got everything in hand, that they understand what's going on, and they're aware of what's happening. So I think that's a key part of it, is making certain that you've got it. Like I said, again, a critical part is this narrative, because when you see the 211 that's available online, it's kind of a check the box and what have you, and it's really the narrative that the IRS is looking for. in terms of here's what's going on and here's what's happening. And again, it starts with specificity about, yes, here's the taxpayer, here's what's going on. But then what you want to do is essentially in plain language describe what's going on. In other words, that yes, here's what they're up to. Sometimes it can be obviously difficult if it's a very complicated tax shelter transaction with a corporation, not easy. Individual accounts, particularly illegal offshore accounts, tend to be a little bit more straightforward. Mary has an account, it's in this bank, and she's not declaring it. Okay, pretty straightforward for the service in terms of what's going on, but still the details of it, who they're involved in. And that's another part to think about, is that the service has a huge interest in all the enabling parties, all the parties that are assisting the taxpayer, be it an individual with an offshore account or be it a corporation with a shelter. They really want to know, okay, who is helping them, who's the accounting firm that's helping them, who's the law firm that's advising them, and things of that nature are a big deal for them. So you want to walk them through that. Sometimes I find it easiest to have an appendix that lays out kind of all the folks and here's what they did and here's what they are. But just in the flow of the narrative, you want to try to cover that as well too. Can be quite helpful. So I would encourage you to do that. And then the second part is who else may verify or support what you're saying. Again, put yourself in the shoes of the IRS to say, yes, here's who I would talk to, here's where they're located, here's their address, here's what I think they will say. That can be helpful. And then last is, again, kind of almost a separate sheet that would say, yes, here's the great document. Sometimes you may not have all the key documents, and that's understandable, but to say, yes, it's this document, it's called this document, it's in the control of this person, it's here, and this is where it's located, matters a lot. And particularly, again, going back to offshore, you really want to think about people that are in the U.S. Folks watch a lot of TV, watch a lot of movies, and they think, oh, well, the IRS will just go grab that person in foreign country X. Not so easy for them. And so what you really want to think about is, yes, here's people that live in this country. Here's people that are U.S. Taxpayers and U.S. citizens. You get the idea. People that they can get a hold of and talk to, or businesses that they can go to get records. That's going to be really a premium for them in terms of their interest. So those are sheets. I find them useful to be, like I said, somewhat that they're naturally to be flowed in the narrative to get there, but otherwise to go through it. And again, particularly on the offshore accounts, they're going to be interested in everyone involved in touching U.S. folks, who's going overseas, who's meeting them, who's talking to them, who's traveling to the U.S. All that is going to be a big interest for the government. And then obviously on the other side, any names that you've got of folks with accounts is going to be a very strong interest for them as well too. So both those will matter. Dollars will matter as well too. They want to get an understanding of the accounts. That can often be difficult of saying, yes, Mary has an account and it's worth this much, particularly if you've got a laundry list of folks showing, yes, here's several hundred people. I get it, that can be difficult, but what they'll be very interested in is the top dollar to say, yes, overall the bank has these many accounts. They have 800 accounts, and I anticipate their value is $3.8 billion is the value of those accounts. That's useful for them as they're looking at the bank and looking at what they're doing. And again, any enabling parties will matter for them as well too. So I think you want to get the filing in. Again, that's where I think attorneys can help a lot, is getting the filing put together, dealing with any legal issues, making certain that the government themselves understands why we think there's a violation of tax law, and just making certain that your pencils are well sharpened to make sure you've got it put forward. Like I said, again, the biggest problem is the IRS gets thousands of filings. It's making sure that your filing gets attention. I think it's then patience on your side once it is filed, in that it can fairly quickly, the IRS will give you a claim number. That's fine. They've gotten a little bit behind because of the shutdown with Corona, but they do a good job of getting those numbers out. They do interview folks. They don't interview everybody, but they will interview some folks, and that's obviously a good sign that they're interviewing you and what have you. But it's not the end of the world that they're not interviewing you. They will now allow you to get kind of an annual status update of your case. You write to them, and you can get that, and that's a pretty good use. When that was put in by the Congress here lately by my old boss, Senator Grassley, and that's provided a little bit more of a window to where you are. But one thing you need to keep in mind is that it's a long process. You've got to get them. The IRS moving. It's not like the IRS will turn on a dime on your filing. It could be several months there. They then need to audit them, and then the taxpayer's rights to appeal all need to end. So it can easily be, and then they need to collect the money, and sometimes that can be a little bit rough because the taxpayer is, doesn't have the funds immediately, or it's going to be payments over time. So it can be a 7-8 year process at times for the award to come. And as I said, the award is 15 to 30%. There's factors that are pluses and minuses in terms of getting the award, maximizing the amount. And again, that's something where attorneys help, but down the road for you, you can look at the factors, and you would want to then kind of try to give the service a sense of why you think you should get a higher percentage. But those are happy problems, obviously, if you're getting in the position of them having the funds. But a lot of it can kind of be, how can I put it? The way to maximize your award is getting it right at the beginning in terms of laying out what you know, talking about all the parties involved, and getting everybody on the same page is really going to do the most to help you. Kind of at the end, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to correct some problems. You can highlight the positives you've done, but sometimes it can be difficult to say, well, I should get credit for you went after this person as well too. I should get credit for it. Better to name that person at the beginning as opposed to trying to claim that you should get it as a related action. You're allowed for related actions, not just your action, but related, but it can be difficult. So anyways, those are kind of some general points for you to think about on it. It's a good program. I think the service is well-intentioned. It doesn't always run perfectly, but I think the whistleblower office is friendly to whistleblowers. They want the program to succeed. And I found it, I've helped a lot of clients and I've had a lot of success with it. And so I think, if you've got good information on anybody that's not paying attention. One last thing I would say is you just need to show that they owe tax. You don't need to show that they committed fraud or what have you. That's fine. That's a nice bonus. But really, you just have to say, hey, this person owed tax. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to call me or email me. It's dzerbe@zmflaw.com. But I wish you well and happy to help you in any way in the National Whistleblower Center. Thanks very much.